Blazing Saddles, 1974, wasn't just a comedy, it was a revolution, a Western like no other, filled with outrageous gags, fearless satire, and characters that broke every rule Hollywood ever set. But behind the laughter and chaos, the production was filled with risk, controversy, and moments that could have ended the film before it even began. From casting surprises to banned scenes and jokes that tested the limits of taste, these are the 10 shocking facts you've never heard before. Get ready to dive deep into the wild, untold story behind one of cinema's most fearless comedies. Fact 1. The studio's initial reaction. When Blazing Saddles was first presented to Warner Brothers, executives were shocked. They had never seen a comedy like this, full of racial satire, outrageous gags, and completely unpredictable humor. Many believed it was too risky for mass audiences, and some even suggested shelving the film entirely. But Mel Brooks, confident in his vision, argued that the movie's boldness was exactly what would make it stand out. He promised that audiences would embrace the absurdity, the wit, and the subversive comedy. Meanwhile, the cast and crew were nervous. Even seasoned actors like Gene Wilder and Cleavon Little weren't sure how the public would react. This tension gave the production a unique energy. Every scene was performed with a mix of daring humor and creative spontaneity. Brooks's gamble paid off. When released in select cities, the film generated massive word-of-mouth excitement. Critics who initially doubted it soon praised its audacity, and the movie became a benchmark for irreverent, boundary-pushing comedy in Hollywood. This behind-the-scenes story reveals how risk, vision, and courage turned a controversial project into a timeless classic. Fact 2. Warner Brothers almost killed Blazing Saddles, how Mel Brooks turned a near-shelved movie into a cultural shock. When Blazing Saddles first hit the Warner Brothers screening room, the reaction was colder than anyone expected. Studio execs, used to safe comedies and predictable jokes, watched a film full of racial satire, brazen profanity, and jokes that deliberately crossed lines. Some executives actually recommended shelving the picture, but Mel Brooks believed the movie's danger was the point. The satire was deliberate, aimed at exposing and ridiculing racist attitudes, not endorsing them. Behind that fight were real people: Mel Brooks pushing the studio, Richard Pryor shaping the script in early drafts, Cleavon Little bringing dignity and timing to the role of Bart, and Gene Wilder helping shape the film's tone with restraint and heart. Brooks argued that keeping the film raw and unsoftened was the only honest way to force audiences to laugh and think. He got his way. Warner agreed to a limited release in New York, Los Angeles, and Chicago as a test, and the movie exploded by word of mouth. Critics who initially sat on the fence later praised the film's audacity, and box office success proved a lesson. Studios sometimes confuse risk with failure. The deeper lesson for filmmakers is practical. Satire must have a backbone, strong casting, trusted collaborators, and a clear argument to survive commercial pressure. Mel had that backbone: a top-tier cast, co-writers who knew the rhythm of edgy jokes, and a willingness to take heat. Because of that, what almost died in a boardroom became a turning point in how Hollywood understood and sometimes feared satire. Fact 3. Richard Pryor was supposed to star. One of the biggest surprises behind Blazing Saddles is that it was written for Richard Pryor himself to play Sheriff Bart. Pryor co-wrote the script alongside Mel Brooks, Norman Steinberg, Andrew Bergman, and Alan Uger, injecting sharp racial humor that only he could deliver. Warner Brothers executives, however, grew nervous. Pryor had a reputation at the time for unpredictable behavior, and the studio felt he was too much of a risk to cast as the lead. Instead, they selected Cleavon Little, a Broadway actor with less controversy attached. But Pryor's fingerprints are all over the movie. From the biting jokes about race to the rhythm of Bart's comebacks, Much of the film's edge comes directly from Pryor's pen. What's fascinating is that Pryor's absence actually strengthened the satire. Cleavon Little's dignified, controlled delivery balanced the outrageous script in ways that Pryor's raw comedy might not have. This casting twist reveals how behind-the-scenes studio fears can shape the final tone of a film, sometimes in unexpected ways. Fact 4, the campfire scene almost got cut. The infamous campfire scene, where cowboys sit around eating beans and then break into loud, exaggerated flatulence, nearly got deleted from the movie. Studio executives thought it was too vulgar and would alienate audiences, but Mel Brooks fought for it, arguing that no Western had ever shown what really happens when cowboys live on beans. The scene became one of the most famous moments in comedy history. Critics now cite it as the first mainstream Hollywood fart joke, a lowbrow gag that actually elevated the satire, poking fun at the overly clean Western myths Hollywood had built for decades. Fact 5, Gene Wilder replaced Gig Young. The role of the Waco Kid, played so perfectly by Gene Wilder, almost had a tragic ending. Originally, the part went to Gig Young, a respected actor, but on the first day of filming, Young arrived visibly drunk and couldn't perform the role. He was quickly fired. Brooks immediately called Gene Wilder, who had already worked with him on The Producers. Wilder flew in at short notice and completely transformed the role, adding his calm, sarcastic delivery that perfectly balanced the wild energy of Cleavon Little. This last-minute casting change shaped the film's chemistry and is one reason the Bart-Waco Kid partnership remains one of the most beloved duos in comedy history. Fact 6, the film almost got an X rating. When Blazing Saddles was submitted to the MPAA ratings board in 1974, there was real concern it would receive an X rating. The problem wasn't nudity or sex, it was the mix of racial slurs, profanity, and vulgar gags that went way beyond what Hollywood comedies had ever done. The infamous campfire fart scene and some of the movie's racially charged dialogue shocked the censors. Mel Brooks, however, refused to cut the most controversial lines. Instead, he argued that the offensive language was deliberately satirical, exposing racism, not promoting it. After intense negotiation, the film secured an R rating, but barely. Had it been rated X, it would never have played in mainstream theaters, and the history of comedy would have looked very different. This fight shows how ratings boards are not just moral judges, they directly shape which stories audiences ever get to see. Fact 7, cameos and hidden appearances. One of the film's biggest delights is spotting the cameos. Mel Brooks didn't just direct, he appeared in 3 separate roles: the corrupt Governor William J. Lepetomaine, a Native American chief, and a Yiddish-speaking background character. Meanwhile, legendary jazz band leader Count Basie makes a surreal cameo in the desert, playing live big band music in the middle of nowhere. And Dom DeLuise, another comedy star, pops up as the flamboyant choreographer in the chaotic movie studio finale. These cameos aren't random. They're Brooks' way of constantly reminding viewers that the movie is both a parody and a playful meta-joke about Hollywood itself. Today, they stand as Easter eggs that reward fans who pay close attention. Fact 8, the ending broke the fourth wall. Perhaps the most radical moment in Blazing Saddles is its ending. Instead of resolving in the Old West, the story literally breaks out of its own movie set. Cowboys crash into a neighboring musical set, a cafeteria brawl erupts on the Warner Brothers lot, and Bart and the Waco Kid end up at a real Los Angeles movie theater watching Blazing Saddles itself. This complete demolition of the fourth wall was unheard of in mainstream comedy. Critics were divided. Some thought it was chaotic nonsense, while others called it a brilliant statement about Hollywood's own absurdity. Mel Brooks used this ending to remind audiences that film is an illusion, and comedy works best when you're aware of the trick. It remains one of the boldest, most self-aware endings in cinema. Fact 9. The language sparked boycotts. While audiences in big cities embraced the movie's satire, Blazing Saddles faced real pushback in parts of the U.S. Some southern theaters refused to screen it, citing the film's heavy use of racial slurs. Civil rights groups themselves were split. Some criticized Brooks for repeating the language of racism, while others applauded him for turning slurs into the butt of the joke. The controversy only fueled interest. Newspapers debated whether comedy had gone too far, and church groups called for boycotts. But Brooks defended the script, saying, "The bad guys use the bad words, and they look like fools doing it." That framing is what kept the satire sharp. Language wasn't used to empower racism, but to strip it of dignity. This fact shows how comedy can split audiences, yet also change the conversation. Fact 10. Legacy. In 2006, Blazing Saddles was selected for preservation in the National Film Registry by the Library of Congress, recognition given only to films deemed culturally, historically, or aesthetically significant. What began as a movie the studio nearly shelved became a comedy masterpiece studied in universities. Directors from the Farrelly brothers to Jordan Peele have cited it as proof that satire can be dangerous, fearless, and still timeless. Even today, debates around whether the film could be made in the modern era keep it in public conversation. But that's its legacy, a film that forces people to laugh, squirm, and confront uncomfortable truths about America. Few comedies last 50 years. Blazing Saddles didn't just last, it rewrote the rulebook. Blazing Saddles wasn't just another comedy, it was a cultural earthquake. From near boycotts to nearly being banned with an X rating, Mel Brooks' fearless satire broke every Hollywood rule and somehow turned into a timeless classic. 50 years later, it still sparks debates, laughter, and shock in equal measure. That's the mark of a movie that mattered. If you've enjoyed this deep dive into the untold history of Blazing Saddles, make sure to subscribe to Hidden Secrets Vault. We uncover the shocking, hidden, and unbelievable truths behind the movies you thought you knew. Hit that bell so you never miss our next breakdown. And tell us in the comments which classic film you want us to explore next. Because here, every movie has a story the credits never told,